Oh, I got it. I got it.
Hi, puppy. Hi, baby.
Okay. We are live.
Hi.
I am Jill Moniz, and this is Vanessa German. And this is the exhibition, The Artist Channels 33 Intimate Technologies of Soul. So I'm going to just do a walkthrough so everyone can see what it feels like to be in the space with these gorgeous and powerful objects.
Hey,
Vanessa.
buddy. Hi,
if you
Jill.
wanna... Hi, Vanessa German.
Hi.
Look.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vanessa. And I'm in Asheville, North Carolina on Cherokee land. And for those of you who, if you can't see me physically, I'm a Black woman with brown skin, and I have long curly hair, and I'm wearing a button-up shirt, and I am in my studio. And there are dogs here, so sometimes you might hear dogs barking. So I'm on the East Coast right now. It's good to see
we're in LA.
sculptures.
Look, I can show you myself. Hi. So do you want to talk about how this work was made?
Yes. So first, thank you, Jill, for making this happen and walking through and doing this tour for humans who are joining us. And thank you to Natu for being present, and everyone who has been a part of bringing this exhibition to the space and making it happen. And thank you to everybody who joins. If at any point you have a question, you can ask the question in the chat, or you can at any time. You don't have to wait necessarily for a question and answer time. I want to begin by saying that I did not know, I did not plan to make this body of work. I grew up in Los Angeles and experienced a really weighty amount of trauma this year, on top of like this sort of like accumulated trauma. And I really needed to be in a space that felt safe, that had the capacity to hold everything that I was carrying, but also carry me through to a place of healing. So I returned to Los Angeles, where I grew up, and to the beaches that my mother would take us to when we were kids in LA. And my mom had a really special relationship with the ocean. She would often, like around right before sunset, in enough time for us to get to the ocean by sunset, or when there was a full moon, she would pack us all into the car. And there were 5 of us, so it's a lot to get 5 little kids in the car. And we would drive from mid-city Los Angeles to the ocean. And I got to experience my mother communing with nature and communing with the ocean. So I sought the same communion. And I went to LA to heal and work through a lot of trauma and grief. And I did not plan to make a body of work. I really planned to just like walk around and move slowly and cry and like figure stuff out. But about the second week into my time in Los Angeles, I knew that I had to make art, but I was living in an Airbnb that was actually a studio. It didn't even have like a separate bedroom. And I asked the woman who was running the Airbnb if I could get some power tools and set up a space to make art. And she said yes. And that's where these works came from being built on the back of a deck in Santa Monica with a 10-inch Ryobi circular saw, 2 drills, and wood. That the woman at the Airbnb was really amazing. She would like drive me to Home Depot, and I would be able to get lumber, and she would take me around places because I didn't have like the mobility of having my own vehicle. So I really struggled. I was struggling greatly when I got to Los Angeles, and I wanted to not just, be inside of my own sorrow and holding my suffering very close. So I started to work little by little, making objects that were small. And normally when I'm working, I'm making objects that are, for the past like 5 years, 5 to 7 years, I've been making entire communities of objects, like no longer making singular discrete objects, but making entire communities, installations of objects that are immersive and take over entire museum spaces. And I'm living in an Airbnb in Santa Monica, and I can't do that. But what I could do was really return to the beginning soil of my practice, which really was a practice where I did something that the world around me never told me I had permission to do, and sort of discouraged, which was really entering into the inside of the inside of the inside of myself, authorized by my own deep permissions and my own deep need to be well in my body and to be well in my soul. So years ago, when I was in Homewood in Pittsburgh and working, I really gave myself permission to love in my practice, to gather materials because they felt right, and to allow form to rise through the breath of my being as I turned over whatever was in my heart or whatever was in my mind. And that is the way that I came into the truest relationship with love. So these objects gave me the opportunity to return to a practice that was deeply personal and spiritual, unapologetically enveloping every part of my being joyfully, and with like deep commitment and faith in the process, like having faith in the process. And those of you who are artists, you know what it is to come to a place where you just have to let your process be and have faith in it and live in it. So those works came from really a return to a place of soul, and an entrance from this place of love and soul into really bringing, really investing ingredients of consciousness into the work. So Jill, should I say something else about that? I feel like I've said a lot.
You have said a great deal, and I think we want to hear more about that, though, in terms of how you moved from that studio through to connecting into this space, into transformative arts, to finish the work.
So okay, thank you. So I am building these small power figures in Los Angeles, gathering materials from flea markets, from, the trash, from little antique malls, from the African bead dealers at the, okay. I'm just looking at this question really quick. I'd love to know more about how you came to create these. Were you inspired by materials, or did you have particular ideas and then seek the materials that you found appropriate? Okay, I'm going to incorporate answering that into what I'm saying right now. So because when I went to Los Angeles, I brought a lot of watercolors and materials to make work on paper. And that was what I thought I would be doing. So when I came to know that I would be, and I had to really like let it rest and be in my body, that I was going to be building sculptures. And I love building things. Like I love power tools. I love cutting wood. I love I love building the structure up, the internal structure. All of it is very invigorating. It's really invigorating to me. So I grew up going to flea markets in Los Angeles. And one of the ways that I know how to work as a person working in assemblage is to, one, trust my instincts, which is a technology of soul for me. My instincts are a way that I can be in direct communication with my ancestors, in direct communication with my organs, in really direct, immediate, inspiring communication with grace, with everything in the cosmos and everything in the universe that conspires its ingredients towards the fullness and the wholeness of my being, not just as a Black woman, not just as a queer woman, not just as an African in America, but as a consciousness. So I trust my eyes and I trust my hands. And it's really a very precious part of the process for me to go out into the world. So if I go to a flea market, I can move between stalls very quickly because it's like I turn a kind of radar on inside of myself. It's like I turn on a material detector. Like some people walk around, oh, I can talk about this sculpture right here. All those blue knives. I found those blue knives at the Mart. And could you like just hold on this object for a moment, Jill? Those blue knives I found, and I knew immediately as a person who works really like almost pharmaceutically with the color blue, I knew that I would bring them home. I knew that they would be in a work that would be all blue. And I knew that I needed them to speak to this place of like wretched grief. And like when I got to Los Angeles summer, I felt really, really bad about myself. I felt like a monster. And I needed a way to honor the place where those feelings came from and not rest in them. And so those knives I found at the Mart, and I knew that I would use them in a blue work, but until the work began, until I started building that work, I didn't know how I would use them. Because if you look at the show, there are several works in the show that are cobalt blue based. So I went back and forth between the East Coast and the West Coast this summer, between my house in Pittsburgh and the West Coast. And I was learning, I was actively in a place of laboratory in my little Airbnb studio where I was trying things and I was working. I would like meditate at the beginning of the morning and I would open myself up to this place of cleansing and of healing. And then I would go into the work. I slept in the same room where I made the work, which is, I had never really dreamt around work before. This F piece on the dictionary is one of the first works that I made. So it's not surprising to me that one of the first works I made was a blue work. And the F, like I took a piece of paper and I just wrote down all these F words. And this was a piece that really helped bring me out of a state of like physical depression, because I was, that piece is very heavy and I worked with a lot of different materials and I sort of strung rhythmic patterns of beads. And it was, it was a work, it was like one of the first works and I needed it to carry me through to a new place. So I found the dictionary at the Mart in Venice, California also, and I knew that I would use it as a base. So sometimes when I look at an object, I can see the future of the object inside of one of my sculptures. I can see how it's going to take shape. And sometimes I can actually have a vision of an entire completed sculpture, and I work to bring the future of that existing sculpture to my present self. And it's like moving time and space together. And then there are other times that I just know what objects to get. So right now, like I'm in my studio in Asheville, and if you look at the mantle, you just see all these different objects. Like you see a plaster foot that I made, an Aunt Jemima that has a factory defect on it, which is wild because it's a real McCoy Aunt Jemima, and it only has one eye painted on it. And you see glove molds and a ceramic bird, and there's crystals and these old chicory coffee bags from New Orleans. So I'm always collecting objects that feel right. And inside of the phrase feel right, there is an entire technology at play, which speaks to titling the show, is one of the ways it speaks to 33 intimate technologies of soul. And I stayed in Los Angeles for June, July, most of August. And then I had to come back east and start doing work. Things that had been rescheduled for COVID were put back on. And so I had to go back to work. This is another blue work. Like, I swear to you, some of these blue pieces, these were the first pieces that I made, like actively feeling like I was drowning in the blues. I really, at the time that I was making these first blue pieces, because the very smallest piece, thank you so much, Jose. The very smallest work is the first work I made, which was a blue piece that's like blue and turquoise. This is lapis on the top. The other piece is apatite. Using crystals in the work is a way that I connect to the ancient technologies of our most ancient ancestors, recording life and recording time inside of crystals, and the earth recording time inside of crystals, and then being able to access that which has been recorded in the crystal as wisdom, and also recognizing that your body is made of the same thing and you can access this deep wisdom inside of it. When I left, okay, if I may, I'm looking this question. Hey, Boo, try to stand center of the camera so you can get, okay, thanks. Love so much. If I may, who is pictured in the center eye of the chest of that blue body? Oh, wow, I don't know. I'll see if Jill can look at that work again. And I'll answer that question. So this blue work and the F blue piece and the lapis blue piece were the first pieces that I made. And this blue work was really important to me because sometimes I need my hands to be busy to keep my heart from sinking deeper. And what I did in this work is like strung rhythmic patterns of beads, which is, it might be difficult to read that on the screen, but they're patterns, rhythmic patterns of turquoise and a bead that one of my friends brings back from Qom in Iran that is made by this one family in Iran. And stringing these beads for a day and a half to use was an important doorway to release a lot of salt from my heart. And at the end of August, I have known Jill I met Jill about 3 years ago when I had a show in LA, and her practice as a curator and as a human who works in relationship, concert, and collaboration with artists in a way that is relationship-based, that has a degree of intimacy and has the space that can span the spectrum from like really deeply having a deeply caring, nurturing relationship with artists to really helping them develop and formulate ideas and then bringing those ideas to the world. And when I first met Jill and found out about how she works, I was like, this is a way that I would love to have a person in my life that I could talk to about my ideas that are blending this place of political, spiritual, cultural, the simultaneity of time, places of spirit and power and love and purpose, and also interrogating certain things about the art world. So I had been having conversations with Jill. Jill came over to the Airbnb studio and looked at work. And at the end of the summer, we talked about doing a show. And it was important to me to show the work all together. It was really important to me to, I think what was really, one of the things that was really special about the relationship with Jill and this body of work and transformative arts is I was in such a place of transformation, and it required being responded to with a sense of immediacy, which because Jill is who she is and the space is what it is, I was able to move the work from my studio in Santa Monica. Jill and Aza came and packed it up and stored it for like 6 weeks until I could get back to Los Angeles and complete the work for the show to open. And what you should all know is that none of the work was done. When I left LA at the end of August, nothing was finished. I got back to Los Angeles the end of the first week of November. And I basically worked, sometimes 20 hours a day, 18 hours a day at the space next door to Transformative Arts to complete the work. I did the same thing where I slept in the same room where I was building the work. And it was kind of this really altered state of creative being where I would sometimes, work for 12 hours and sleep for 3 hours and work for 6 hours and then eat lunch with Jill. And sometimes I would only be talking to Jill or Aza and working so hard. But what had returned for me in this entire process was really entering into the truth of the process that is whole and for me. Because being in the art world, the way that I've been in the art world, I think I got some lines crossed in my head and in my heart. And that last 2 weeks of finishing all of these there's 31 pieces in this show. And then there's 3 works at LA Louver that complete. There's actually 34 works altogether. And that last 2 weeks, I felt like I really was able to viscerally, physically, spiritually know who I am again as an artist. I had a lot of pieces of me had broken off and shifted and working. Actually, I was getting scared that I wasn't going to be able to feel okay making art again. Even though I know things come in cycles when you're and I would work, but it would take a lot for me to get to a place of work. But that last 2 weeks was really transformative for me. And I was thoroughly ensconced in the work. Susan Laurie Parks has this essay called Possession. And I think about that, how artists can enter into this state of possession and obsession that sometimes you have to go to that place. Oh, so the question that I'm going to answer next says, I'm curious if you saw your work differently when you came back to it in November. I did. I definitely saw it differently. There were works that were in progress that I totally took apart and did something different with them. I was experiencing working at this small scale as absolutely not a limitation at all. I had a curator tell me 10 years ago, they wanted to show my work in this museum in DC, and I won't tell you which museum it is. And the curator at one point sort of sits back and they're like, we love your work. And the curator sits back and they looked around the room and they said, this is a really big room. And I was like, yeah, this is a really big room. And they say, it's really nice to have really big work in this room. And they were like, come back and show us your work when you're working at a larger scale. So for a while, my work just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But it was really good for me to have this tiny muscular scale to put an abundance of both physical material, but also material from my spirit and from my consciousness into the work. And when I came back, I really benefited from that laboratory time over the summer where I was trying a lot of different ways of working and working with different materials, and then allowing myself to enter into the process of working in a way that was not fettered by a lot of distraction. I was really isolated this summer in creating the body of work. And I learned that to take care of myself in the space of isolation and making, that I needed to have social time, like 1 day a week or 1.5 days a week. And so sometimes I would see Jill, sometimes I would see my friends Stu and Ruthie, and I would get to talk to people. But I really benefited, and I'm still processing. Like, I want you to know that none of this is set in stone. This is all completely living process, from the summer into the body of work. But when I came back in November, I remember being so happy to see the work. And then I could see the places, I could hear the work telling me things about my process. Like, each object has a voice. Each object is communicating with me distinctly as the hands through which the object comes forth. And I had to learn from the objects, and I was more having a space of listening available when I came back to Los Angeles. And it was a lot to listen to, and it was all very exciting. And yeah, there were things I came back and I took things apart. They totally came apart. I know that probably Jill and Asa were surprised. Like, I would take work to the workspace and come back and it would not be recognizable.
Do you want
I
to talk
love
about this
part.
piece?
Yeah, I love this piece. I really love swaddling fabric and fabric bundles and bringing that space of bulge and tension as a woman, as a queer woman, as a woman who loves women and is in like dimensional relationship intentionally with women and femmes and queer folks and non-binary people for whom we enter into relationship with our own bodies and then with each other's bodies with a lot of stuff sometimes, but also spaces of freedom. So I, being a fat woman, also a woman who loves women, there are all these ways that I have been trained to like hide my body and be ashamed of my body in times of intimacy. And I'm really grateful to all of the lovers I've had who've loved my body, sometimes more than I loved my body. And so this work is an unearthing of these secret places that I had been trained to loathe. And some of them were just the shape of my body. Some of them were like belly politics, like having a belly or having, big arms, just all these different, just all of these different submerged loathings I actually celebrate in this work. And one of them is this place of rage, this place of shadow, a place of wanting, needing to exercise the rage physically from my body, but also recognizing that creating that artwork, using that hammer as a head, as a place of eye contact is, it is also in relationship to the fact that I have the capacity as a maker to build my way, to create my way out of pitfalls of self-loathing. Like there are ways that I've been trained, I realize that I've been trained and programmed in this world to really loathe myself and loathe my body. But as a maker, I can build my own ladder. I can construct devices to bring me out of that place. And, I experienced a lot of darkness around the rage that I have and a lot of shame for even feeling it as somebody who is so love directed really verbally love directed too. And there would be times that like people would see me angry or they would hear me angry and they'd be like, ooh, I thought you were all about love. I thought you were about these things. And I had to learn to make space and to honor the shapes of rage and the shapes of shadow inside of me, inside of that. I'm going to look at this question that just came in. From Aaron writes on IG, your pieces speak so loudly. So glad I could see on, oh, yeah, thank you for this message, Aaron Writes Books. And thank you to CCH Pounder, who I got to meet at LA Louver and share. It was really wonderful to like spend some time with my work together with her. Thank you for that comment. This work, this Viardro dove on the top of it, I found that piece in Venice, and I knew immediately, like, I don't have to make several laps around a flea market, an antique mall, or a little junk store or a thrift store. I pay very close attention to the frequency of yes that is inside of me. So I know when an object is supposed to come home to the studio. Sometimes I know how I will use it, and sometimes it is really important just to have it in my space because it'll be in conversation, it'll stew together with the ingredients that are already in the space. I work specifically up until this point, there's more color in the Transformative Arts show than there has ever been in any work, in any show that I've done before. Normally I'm working in white, black, red, and gold at the same time. So when I work with white, I am working with the spirit of peace. I'm working with ancestral spirit. I'm working with the spirit of ghosts. I'm working with the spirit of peace drawn out through time. And I'm working with the spirit of cleansing. So to cover a big Black body, the figure, a robust figure of a Black woman with white and with prayer beads, and even prayer beads that have red, they're actually wrapped with red to bring into this space of blood, and the bottles bringing into this space of movement of spirit, in relationship to, if you think about bottle trees, but not just bottle trees as protection, but the way that in some African cultures, you would put a vessel on a grave to help the spirit rise up and move through. And the center chest of this work about peace is a piece of quartz, and quartz clarifying, quartz bringing in the power to have your human body connected to your own capacity as an earthling, as a material being, to be a vehicle of peace in relationship to the earth, that we are expressions of the earth. I also recognize that as a big-bodied Black woman, that which is projected on me, whether it is worthlessness, whether it is a lot of things have been projected on me in my lifetime as a little Black girl and as a big Black woman. But to have an entire work that is sort of weighted in all that white and all that spirit of ghost and spirit of peace and spirit of movement, of spiritual movement and prowess, it is like every work has something to teach me. And that work shows me how to honor the connections in the simultaneity of time with my ancestors and with my earth, with the earth, and with the earth as an ancestor, because the earth is also a being. I love this work. This work is called Bombshell. And this work is like one of the last works that was completed for this show. And I, as a woman who loves women, I hardly ever talk about my queerness in my practice. It comes out in a lot of the performance art that I do, but for me, and y'all know this because those of you who are listening to this artist talk, for me, this is a queer work, right? And it is a work for me about both loving my body, loving my breasts, loving nipples, loving hips, loving the shapes, all of the different shapes that that our bodies take and celebrating it. And inside of the work is, there's images of me. You can find them on my Instagram from the Armory several years ago. And I'm wearing the dress. I cut apart a dress in my suitcase. And I knew that I would turn that dress into material for work. But it has quilt pieces on it. And my mother was a quilter. I have this poem that says, my mother was a quilter. She could turn a single cut of fabric into an entire universe. She had eyes on the tips of her fingers. And my mother, my mother's spirit, and like my mother in cosmic agreement with all of the children that she had, gave us the most precious gift of being makers, being people who are in active relationship with both your hands and your imagination. And there's celebration in this work, and there is joy in this work. And I found that bale thing at a flea market in Santa Monica. I am looking at your questions. I'm so looking forward to seeing it in person later this week. Yes, so Monica, the answer to your question, have we titled each one of these pieces? Yes, each one of the works has a title, and you can go on the Transformative Arts Now Instagram, and there's an object list, and you'll be able to see, and you'll be able to see the title for each work. And I'm looking at the next question is, something you said, lines crossed in my head and my heart with respect to your engagement with the art world. How did that manifest and or impact or interfere with your process of making? That is, that's something that is, gosh, that's a hard, I feel scared to answer that question honestly right now. That's like a sort of a sticky place inside of me. Well, I have been taken advantage of for several years in a really primary relationship that I had in the art world. So that's one thing. And then I experienced a kind of, there's this way that as a self, I don't even want to say it like that. I've definitely had a difficult time experiencing personally ways that I was involved in an art world that sometimes really used a lot of muscle to tell individuals and to sort of shape a world where I'm trying so hard to be diplomatic answering this, but it was about worthlessness. It was about who determines what's valuable, who's valuable, whose work is valuable, and how you treat human beings. So fundamentally, it's a very American experience of disconnect that I've had with the art world. And I could share how I define the art world at another time, but I had a really difficult time with being in spaces where human beings whose job it was to give access to the art world, had work bringing violence into those spaces by devaluing people who saw and experienced and talked about art a certain way, and placing value in other places that gave people permission to devalue human beings. That was a lot. I don't even know if you understand that. That's me trying to be diplomatic. So I did the best I could. Love this exhibit so much. Thank you for bringing it. Thank you, Beth Lynn Cole. This is fantastic. It reminds me of the freedom I feel when I take my bra off at night. That's a real freedom. I don't wear bras a lot, but when I do, it feels really great to take them off. This is a work that is a transmutation for shame. I've been, somebody who I work a lot with, whenever I do any museum shows, mostly solo museum shows, I do residencies. I'll be in the city where the show is for sometimes 2 weeks, and I visit a lot of schools. I visit elementary schools, colleges, universities, senior citizen centers. I want to see a lot of people when I'm in a new city showing work at a museum. And I really was very interested in how shame begins in children. And so this work with this bag of red feathers, this sort of grandmother's bag of red feathers pluming as a crown on top of a found light fixture. We could read this work. I have the ability to read the work from the ground of the work to the top of the work. And the red in this work, it is symbolic of places of secret, places of shame that infect the heart and then spread out through the body and take the body over and become like sometimes tenets that we will pass on to children and we pass on to each other. We share shame with each other. We share the shame that we received and we pass it on to other people. And it's a way of controlling, can be a way of sometimes trying to protect people or controlling their behavior. And I'm really interested in human beings having the space to be emancipated from generational shame, to be emancipated from the lies that initiate shame, to be emancipated into their full capacity as human beings with electric consciousness and deep wisdom. And so while that work has the red beads running in threads from the center of the chest, most of the work is white. And so we talk about white in the other work, which is this place of peace and power and spiritual movement and presence of ancestors and presence of cosmic grace. So that piece is a seeing of the being as the light body, which is that light fixture. And it is the seeing of the being as fully capable to deal with the shame that the body, the mind, the spirit is holding and witness to, and to transmute it. This work is, I think about, this work is for little Black girls. You know, at the art house in Homewood, like I would always be around a lot of little Black girls who would be like floored by my expressions of freedom. Like I was with like 30 little Black girls at a community festival and there was karaoke and I chose to sing a country music song in karaoke. And these girls were just like, they had their jaws open. They were like, how do you even know this song? Like, do Black girls sing country music? Do Black girls do this? Are you a real Black girl? Is it okay for Black girls to love all these different things? And I made that work thinking about how wise and how powerful little Black girls are and how they deserve to inhabit their humanity with all of the guts and all of the love and all of the curiosity about their humanity, to inhabit their Blackness, to inhabit their girlness, or to not inhabit their girlness. And the piece in the center of the piece under the glass dome is a check, like a stamp for checks or receipts, and it says paid. And I think about how I can venture my imagination into the lives of my ancestors who were on this land for hundreds of years doing work that dehumanized them. I think about how, you know, up until the 30s, 1929 or 1930. It wasn't a crime to caution warning. I'm about to talk about sexual violence a little bit, but very briefly, but it wasn't a crime to rape a Black woman. And that work is saying that all of this price has been paid for you. You get to enter fully into the gold, into the lush abundance, into the wilderness of your own humanity. You can enter fully into the wilderness of your own being, and the price has already been paid for you at the gate. You can be free. You can run. You can inhabit your body. You can be sex positive. You can be asexual. You be whatever you want to be. And you don't have to explain it to anybody. You are golden, you are whole, and you are holy at the same time in your utter wholeness. And that work, I think about this little girl who was at the art house one day. It was like an 80-degree day. And I noticed she had a lot of clothes on. Like, she had jeans on and she had sweatpants on. She had like a full school uniform and she had a hoodie on, and it was 80 degrees and we were at the art house, and me and the other woman who was running the art house that day were concerned about her because she was just sitting down and it was really hot. And I was like, I think, we were talking to her and we were like, we think you should like maybe take off your coat, or like, here's some water, maybe take your hoodie off, like relax a little bit. We're concerned that you're going to overheat. And she was kind of like sleepy or lethargic. And what she told us is that she had so much clothes on because and she was in middle school, because the boys would do this thing, like if they saw a girl in the hallway in between class, like if she was going to the bathroom, and they would like grab this girl up and they would take her to the bathroom and try to get her clothes off of her. And they would film this like really cruel, violent, sexual harassment and assault. And the way that this little girl figured out how to protect herself was to just wear layers and layers of clothes. And that way she would have time to fight. And I think about that technology that came up within her, the technology of survival that she came up with for herself. And that work that we were at before honors that the price has been paid for her, and that she has full agency to her own soul and to the wisdom of her soul to protect her body, her mind, her spirit. This was one of the last works also that came into the show. I wore those shoes when I was working on work, and a lot of my clothing, my hair is in the work, like the braids that I would braid for myself is in the work. And there's the quote that says, like, Jesus said, do you want to be healed? If you want to be healed, pick up your feet and dance. So if you like go back to the beginning of this talk, you'll see that I began with all these blue works, all this weight, all this like tidal waving of cobalt blue and turquoise, just blue in my heart, my body blue, the blues pouring out of my mouth, the blues pouring out of my eyes. And we end with this bright yellow piece with the shoes that I wore on tiptoe in dance, with a woven textile from, I'm not sure, it might be from Ghana, the textile, and the gold leaf that is in the clear bottles on there is gold leaf that was, the left crumbles of leaf from when the pedestals were being gold leafed in the gallery. So that work is a celebration of having made it through to even make the work. And that center, that big piece of cut black glass at the center, centering the soul, centering the brightness of the soul, centering the brightness of the Black soul. Because when I talk to people about this work, I say that these objects have soul and they have a Black soul. They are Black objects. They are Black figures, even though they are all these colors. And this is a celebration this is how joyful it was for me to have made it through the summer and have made it to the place where I had brought the work through. The work came through me. And, you know, that aesthetic abundance, the layering upon layering upon layering, the weight of materials on top of a heavy body, I am almost attempting to make the shape, to make an emotional utterance in that form. How you doing, Jill?
I'm okay. I am certainly not a camera person, but
You're doing great.
I just discovered that those shoes, your shoes are filled with gold. And I had, in all the time I've been here with these objects, I keep discovering more and more parts of them. It's an exceptional experience to keep discovering. I mean, it's amazing how you make work that after a certain number of weeks, I think, oh, I know these pieces. And then I just see something completely new and it blows me away.
Thank you. I
We
love
have a
making
question.
secret work. What do you have? I'm sorry.
What's the question? Can you see the question in the Q&A?
I had thought there's another one. Terrence McLean, do you complete each piece before working on another? I worked on all of them at the same time. Because like when I left, Jill, how many works did we pick up from Santa Monica and deliver downtown? Do you remember?
There were 30 pieces, but only 3 were finished. So there were pieces that were
fully finished. They were almost done. Like we had to do something to everything. So given what Jill just said, that 3 were mostly done, I was working on all of them at the same time because it was this like really experimental laboratory space in that little Airbnb. And I would try things and then I would take what I learned from one piece and I would leap the lesson into the next piece. And then I would come back to another work that I had begun earlier with a lesson that I had learned from another work. And so the work, it was like this accumulation of becoming. The pieces were becoming in this accumulatory fashion. And I had to really pay attention to the material as I was doing it. I love this piece. I love that I'm looking that the face of the piece becomes downtown LA by dint of the mirror. And this is a work that really, it was while like this was one of the last works that were going into the show, and while I was working on this work and some of the last pieces was when Kyle Rittenhouse was on trial for taking the lives of 2 people at a protest in Kenosha where people were protesting what happened to a Black man at a traffic stop. And I could not listen to any news reports about that happening. So when it would come on NPR, when I'd be listening to NPR in my studio in downtown LA, I would have to like run to my iPad or like run to turn the volume down on a speaker because I couldn't bear to hear. I couldn't bear to hear about that trial. And and even like entering into Ahmaud, the trial for the people who took who murdered Ahmaud Arbery, I couldn't handle it. Well, I can't say that I couldn't handle it. It was a lot for me to bear, all the different things that came up inside of me, like the deep sorrow that I felt for their families, for people's families, and also the rage that it was experiencing as somebody who I'm very, very deliberate when I have to call the police. Like, I'll go through a lot of things before I call the police. And this work of reckoning with whiteness and white supremacist delusion as it relates to safety and to what it takes to inhabit your body wholly and fully, when it has been a history of violence and danger for Black and brown and queer folks to inhabit their bodies and to be of the fullness of their entities on this land. And so this work is a reckoning with that. I can read the work symbolically. I feel like in relationship to how the universe speaks to us in symbols. So like the bird on the piece is a symbol for liberty, which is so vaunted in this country. Like liberty, we won our liberties. I defining liberty, and I don't have the person, I cannot quote this directly, I'd have to look it up. I'm sorry for reference that I can't tell you, but I define liberty as the soul's right to breathe. It's that quote, liberty is the soul's right to breathe. And the precious figure next to it, and the precious figure of these two cherubic white figures. And if you look at the body of the work, there are those blue beads from Qom, Iran. There are keys, tennis shoes, and that red, white, and blue on bands of beads, and the toy bird, the chevron beads, and that red at the center of the chest, and the toy horn. The piece wanted to scream. The piece wanted to wail. The piece wanted to say, it's not fair, and it's not fair. It's not right, and it's not right. There is space for my rage in this land, on this land. There is space for me to express my rage and to not have my body be taken from me. Yeah. Jill, do you have any questions for me? Oh, so I'm gonna look at the question. So Jill, you ask your question first, if you have any, and then there's a question in the chat.
Go ahead and get your question in the chat, and we'll wrap it with me asking you just a couple of questions.
Awesome. So I want to thank everybody who's with us. I just looked at my phone and it's 7:00 soon. I'm grateful that you've been with us, and I'm grateful for your questions and for your comments. And if anybody else has questions, you can put them in the chat or in the Q&A. As Jose, I'm reading your question. As the object spirit of each were speaking to you while becoming, did you sense the pieces themselves, were dialoguing with each other? Did they relate, influence their physical manifest in the process? Did they relate, influence their, okay. So the objects are in dialogue with each other. How can I communicate that to you? Like, what's a way that I can communicate what that experience is like? Like if I place in order of being made all of the blue works, and you see the last blue work is the grief body work, I wouldn't have been able to make the work, the grief body, without all of the blue works that came before them. They beget one another, they birth each other, they bring, so each object is also making space in the universe for the next object to come through. In channeling an object and bringing an object up, it is an infinite connection. Everything is in connection, and that connection is a deep love. And the work is, they fire off of that infinite net of jewels that is all of these places of connection. Thank you for that question.
So now it's my turn. So when you see all of this work in communion, in this space, and know that at some point they're going to break up and go out into the world again as individual objects, what is your hope for these pieces and for us who have seen them all together?
I honor that people who've seen them all together are lucky. Like that's a very unique experience. And I invite people to come to the space and to be with the work unguarded, to enter into the space with your heart open and unguarded, and to experience the voices of the work, and to allow yourself to be drawn, to be pulled into whatever work pulls you in. I hope that people who encounter the work listen to themselves as they are in space with the work, because if you feel something with a particular work, given that the work is made in deliberate consciousness, then that feeling is on purpose. I hope that people allow themselves to inhabit that space of feeling being on purpose, and then to be in relationship with the purpose that that feeling is bringing up in them. Because as channeled objects and as objects of power, though objects have something to do, and they have something to do specifically for each individual that feels, honoring feeling, not dismissing feeling, not submerging feeling, not saying that feeling is foo-foo or woo-woo or not valuable, honoring feeling and listening to that. And I hope that people, hold on for a second, please stop. The dogs are upset about a bone. So I hope that people enter into space and they're able to honor themselves. Stop. That they're able to honor themselves and to honor their place of feeling. And I also hope that people enter into a practice of engaging with the technology of their own soul. I hope that even the title of the show makes people say, technology, soul, my soul is a technology, my heart is a technology, intimate technology versus, a public, like, I hope that it opens up this space of awakening your access to the power of your own consciousness, and to using that and utilizing that place of power in your daily life in a world where it can be very difficult to hold wholeness. Thank you for that question, Jill.
You are very welcome. Do you want to talk a little bit about the performance that's going to close the exhibition in January?
Yes, I'm so excited about that. So the performance and it is the 8th, correct, Jill?
Yes.
And the 8th is a Saturday?
Yes.
So I have invited performers and artists who I love and respect that have a practice of like multidisciplinary practice, really. So there will be a series of performances that are arriving and rising into the space through the ideas. Something that Jill wrote when she wrote a little bit about this show, she talked about emancipatory instruments. And so this space of emancipation, emancipatory instruments in relationship with intimate technologies. So there are 5 artists, myself, Natu Fall will be performing together. There is a young dancer named Sam and Amber Phillips, Amber Abundance, Kayla Tang, the amazing performance artist, will be inhabiting with their body inside of their space, body, voice, however they choose to inhabit this. And work through this idea, this resonance with emancipation and emancipatory instruments and intimacy. So those performances, if you come, they might surprise you. You might end up being in a performance. So you might be, you know, it might include you. But the prompt that I gave the performers is that they will choose a work. They'll choose one of the 33 objects to bring forth a performance that is centered on the intimate technology of soul and emancipatory instruments. And then the evening will close out with something really special. Jojo Abbott will be leading us all and guiding us all through ceremony and ritual around emancipatory love, which is going to be so special, and it'll be at the beginning of a new year. So those of you who are interested in having a ritual and a ceremony around emancipatory love and freedom, deep freedom, to push us forward, to guide you forward into the 2022, come and join us for the performances from Kayla Tang, from Sam, from Jennifer Johns will be singing, Amber Phillips, and myself and Natu and Jojo Abbott will be present. So it's going to be a very intense, intimate, spiritual night of closing performance. And I invite you all to join us.
That is exciting, and I'm looking forward to it. Do we have any more questions from the universes that are engaging with us today? I can't see them necessarily.
I'm looking. I got all the questions in the chat, I believe. Have you titled each sculpture? Yes. And yeah, I got, so do you have any other questions, Jill? How has it been for you? How has it been for you to, and like, I want to know, because you didn't start the summer knowing that you were going to show this work. So, you know, I have to thank you so much. I don't think you'll ever know how grateful I am. Like, I tell you often, but even your willingness to be flexible is a gift, has been a gift. So yeah, what has it been like for you?
It's been amazing to watch people, to see people and to interact with them as they interact with these objects. All kinds of people from all different kinds of walks of life. My favorite experience so far was a group of 3 young men, all very different from one another, but clearly deeply connected to each other, came in. And for a long time, they just vibed and moved their way around the room. And then they asked me what my favorite was, which of course I couldn't make up my mind. So we started going from one piece to the other. And we all started discovering things together. And they were teaching me about music. And one of them said, "Oh, but you probably already know about that." And I said, "No, this is the space to learn. So teach me." And he taught me about the difference between minor chords and major chords. And this piece in particular, he said, strung a certain chord inside of him. And he was just grateful to be here. And it reminded him of the shaman of his youth, as a young Latino man growing up in and around Los Angeles. And it was really just lovely to be with them. They reminded me a little bit of my own sons, and just the way they engaged the work was quite lovely. And other people have come in and just described to me what they were feeling. A lot of people come and weep, which is interesting, but it lets people open up their hearts. As you said, it frees people. It is emancipatory. All of these objects are emancipatory in that they free people to feel. And part of what is so, to me, destructive and dangerous about the art world is that it puts parameters and limits on knowing. and who gets to know and who gets to say what an object is and who gets to commune with it or own it, possess it. And this space is about freedom and liberating objects from that kind of experience, from a white cube, from someone telling you what you can know or can't know, or that you're not the right class, or you're not the right color, or you're not the right gender, but that you in here, we can have experiences that we want to have, and see and know what we want to know, and learn from work and learn from each other. And there's some people peeking in the window and having a full conversation. Sorry.
Will you show
And,
me? Will you show me the people peeking in the window? If they're still there. Oh,
there.
hello. It is a really cool show to see from the window. Look, there. Can you? I'm waving at
there
you.
They are.
Hi. Hi.
They can't see you, but he's going to try to come in, but the door is locked right now. So it's been lovely. It's been a way to remind my community here in downtown Los Angeles that we are here for them, even though we can't necessarily touch one another anymore or
But
be without masks. But that we are doing the work, you know, and that we are here for the pleasure of that work. And we are here for the pleasure of learning from one another and hearing and sharing these experiences. And it's been remarkable. So I thank you from all of us here for your willingness to work with us, to allow us to experiment and make these pedestals that we hand gold leaf.
Was that daunting to you? Was the pedestals?
It was, sometimes it was, but then it was very meditative. So Aza and I were in here quietly working away with gold leaf. There was gold leaf strewn all over the floor. And it was a way for me, I think, one of the first times really of feeling like the work that I do with artists had some kind of visible, tangible evidence. You know, I do a lot of work, you mentioned working with artists, talking to them, getting them to open up themselves and their ideas to innovation or to just experimentation in a way that they may have wanted, but may not have had the courage to do. I think that that's part of my work, is to help people find the courage to do new things. And so this process was different in the sense that I can see you and me and Aza and all of the people who helped T. Foley, your sister, your brother. I see everyone in here when I come in, and the community that we made together and this collective love that we shared with each other and continue to share. So it's been transformative for me too.
Thank you for sharing that. It's, yeah, I miss being in this space.
Well, we look forward to having you back. January the 8th is not far away. We're gonna close out here on this beautiful piece in praise of disco, because everybody needs some pleasure in their lives and in their hearts to remember. And do you want to talk about this piece just really quickly?
My friend, I have a friend who is like this really accomplished. He's in the art world. He's an accomplished thinker and curator and builds museums and lifts them up off the ground. And he, you know, as accomplished as he is, he told me, he was like, I'm writing a book about disco. And then he talked to me about disco being this bridge from the civil rights movement to the gay rights movement, and this place of freedom that people found on the disco floor. And it was really inspiring, you know, because that was, I missed that generation. So of disco, and it really brought me to a place of celebration. And I love the footage of Diana Ross at the Central Park concert where she's singing "I'm Coming Out," and she runs to the top of the stage and her hair is blowing and she's wearing that sequins bodysuit, and she says, she's singing "I'm Coming Out," and she stops and she just, you know, gets emotional, and she tells like 100,000 people, she's like, I love you. I love you so much. And they're like, I love you. And even on the film, I could feel her love, and I could feel the gift of her love through music and through the coming together of all of these human beings who loved that music together. And this work is in the spirit of that big, 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 bright, glittery love that brings us together in a place of shine, in a place of pure shine.
I think that's a perfect way to end this talk. All of that love and shine.
Hey,
and
Liz! Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were there. Anyway, that's just me being super excited on Zoom. Hi, love. How are you? All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Natu. Thank you, Daphne.
Thank you, Natu.
Thank you, everyone who made this possible. Jeannie Maples. I love Jeannie Maples is an amazing artist. Everybody should look up Jeannie Maples. And Liz Williams. I love you all. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm not going to log off. I'm going to stay on.